Today, we're jumping into something that often feels pretty shielded, Kabbalah. We hear about it flourishing way back in the Middle Ages with huge texts like the Sefer HaBahir and the famous Zohar. But honestly, for most people, it still seems kind of arcane, maybe obscure, definitely complex.
Right. And that perception is exactly what we want to challenge a bit today, because if you ask the mystics themselves, they'd say they weren't making it up. They insisted it was received wisdom, like a secret map almost, embedded in the very language of Scripture right from the start. So our mission, really, for you listening, is to peel back those complex layers, look past the Hebrew terms maybe, and find the universal ideas. The core idea that, well, the human spirit seems to always look for similar kinds of symbolic maps, to try and grasp the infinite.
Okay, that's quite a claim, though, that a tradition so deeply rooted in, like, the specific stories and language of the Bible could hold universal keys. So yeah, let's unpack that. Where do we start? You're saying we go right back to the Bible.
Exactly, straight to the source code, as you put it earlier, but reading it differently, not just as history or stories. For a Kabbalist, the Bible is this multidimensional lattice of meanings, the literal text. That's just the doorway.
So how does that work in practice? If it's a blueprint, what's the very first clue?
Yeah.
Like Genesis chapter 1, verse 1.
That's the perfect place. The
Yeah.
very first word, Bereshit, in the beginning. But Kabbalists immediately take that word apart. It starts with bet. That's the second letter of the Hebrew alphabet. And that bet is seen to represent duality, the number 2. Everything that's created, distinct, separate. The world as we know it.
Okay, duality implies separation. But separation from what?
Exactly. It implies it emerged from something else, from unity.
Right.
And that unity is symbolized by the missing letter, the first letter, Aleph. It's not in the word Bereshit. The Aleph stands for the one, the Ein Sof, the infinite, the source before anything became distinct or limited. So right away, the first word signals that the created world, the bet, depends entirely on that hidden, ineffable source, the Ale.
Wow. That's a completely different way of reading. Treating it less like a story and more like a structural equation for reality. And this structure, this flow from the infinite down into our world, that's mapped by the Sephiroth, right? The 10 attributes or emanations?
Yes, the 10 Sephiroth. And Genesis actually gives us the mechanism for how that flow happens. Think about how often it says, "and God said," throughout the creation story. For a Kabbalist, that's not just description, it's the actual rhythm of emanation. Divine speech, the logos cascading down through the Sephiroth, from Keter the crown all the way down to Melkut, the kingdom, which is our physical reality. Each said shapes existence a bit more.
So the tree of life that we picture in Eden, that becomes the literal diagram of these 10 divine qualities. Okay, but what about later? Images like, say, the burning bush in Exodus. How does that fit into this symbolic system?
The burning bush, it's a powerful one. Burning, but not consumed. It's seen as a perfect symbol for the Shekinah. That's the immanent indwelling, often seen as feminine, presence of God within creation. It's like the divine radiance is fully present in the physical bush, but it doesn't destroy it or use it up.
So divine presence can inhabit the world without diminishing itself.
Exactly. The bush that's the divine manifestation, but the substance, the bush itself, remains. It suggests God sustains creation without being depleted.
This way of seeing visions and symbols takes us back even further than the medieval Kabbalah, right?
Yeah.
Back to the very earliest Jewish mysticism.
Absolutely. You're talking about Merkava mysticism, the chariot mysticism. It's rooted in Ezekiel's vision, the wheels within wheels, the incredible angelic beings, the throne. People sometimes think it's just a description of God's throne room, but it's much more. It was foundational. Ezekiel's vision was interpreted as a kind of roadmap for the mystic's own soul journey, a perilous climb, really, through heavenly palaces or states of consciousness, using deep meditation, specific knowledge, trying to ascend towards the divine source.
It really sounds like the whole system relies on this idea of hidden connections, often numerical ones. You mentioned the 10 Sephiroth and the 10 Commandments. Are there specific techniques for finding these?
Oh, yes. The fascination with numbers is key. Beyond just the parallels like 10 and 10, there are actual interpretive methods. The most famous is probably gematria. Every Hebrew letter has a numerical value, so you can calculate the value of words. And words with the same numerical value are seen as having a kind of hidden connection, a shared essence.
Can you give an example? How would that work?
Sure. A simple one is the Hebrew word chai, which means life. It's spelled with 2 letters, cheat, which is 8, and yod, which is 10. Add them up, you get 18. Because of that, the number 18 itself becomes deeply symbolic of life, good fortune, blessings. It's not arbitrary. It comes from the letters of the word itself. This kind of practice lifts the text beyond just narrative. It becomes this divine cipher, constantly revealing hidden layers of meaning.
Okay, so this process, finding the structure, the flow from the infinite, the balance, the template of the cosmic human,
Okay.
this is where it gets really interesting for our deep dive today. Because if these are fundamental truths about spirit, well, then we should find echoes of them all over the place, shouldn't we? Globally. Let's look for those shared structures, those similar maps from different traditions.
Yes. And what's so fascinating is we're not necessarily looking for like direct historical borrowing between traditions. It's more about shared spiritual architecture. It seems like cultures, continents apart, using totally different languages, somehow had arrived at similar blueprints for the same fundamental quest.
Hmm.
How does the finite human connect back to the infinite source?
Okay, where should we start? Maybe Sufi Islam. How does their understanding of God's nature resonate with the Sephiro?
The parallels are actually quite striking. You look at someone like the great Sufi master Ibn Arabi. He talks extensively about how the one unknowable God manifests through innumerable names and attributes. Asma'ul Husna, the beautiful names. These names like Al-Aran, the merciful, Al-Quddus, the holy, Al-Jabbar, the compeller, they function very much like the Sephirot. They are distinct qualities or energies of the divine, yet they are all perfectly unified within God's essence. They're how the hidden God becomes known to us.
And what about the path for the seeker, the mystical journey?
Well, the Sufi path is often described as an ascent, right? Moving through various stations or maqamat. It's often pictured as peeling back veils that obscure the divine reality. This directly mirrors the Kabbalistic journey through the four worlds. Asaya, action, Yetzirah, formation, Baraya, creation, Atzilut, emanation. Moving from the most physical to the most purely spiritual. It's the same upward trajectory.
You mentioned the cosmic human template in Kabbalah, Adam Kadmon, who embodies all the Sephiro. Is there a Sufi equivalent?
There is indeed. It's the concept of the insan al-kamil, the perfect human or the completed human. Functionally, it's very similar. Both Adam Kadmon and insan al-kamil represent the ideal template for humanity, a being who has fully actualized and integrated all the divine qualities within themselves. It's the potential we all hold. And, when you read Rumi's poetry, that intense, passionate yearning of the lover for the beloved,
Yes.
you can almost hear the echo of the Shekinah, the feminine divine presence, yearning to reunite with its source, the Ein Sof. It's that same mystical dynamic of separation and longing for union, just expressed in breathtaking poetry.
That's beautiful. Okay, let's shift gears, maybe go east. Hindu Tantra and Kundalini Yoga, it feels very different on the surface, but are there structural echoes there too?
Oh, absolutely. Structurally, it's fascinating. While the Kabbalistic tree of life often emphasizes the downward flow of creation, from spirit to matter, Hindu Tantra, especially with Kundalini Yoga, maps the upward journey of consciousness, from matter back to spirit. You have the chakras, these centers of subtle energy arranged vertically along the spine. Each chakra corresponds to a different level of consciousness, a different element, a different psychological function.
So it's like a ladder within the body,
Yeah.
similar to the way the Sephiro form a ladder on the Tree of Life.
Precisely. The ascent of Kundalini energy, often visualized as a coiled serpent rising from the base of the spine up to the crown chakra. That is the inner journey. It's the internal equivalent of the mystic climbing the tree, moving from the earthly, grounding Sephiro like Malkut up towards the transcendent Keter. Different imagery, same core process of ascent and integration.
And what about the divine feminine? We talked about the Shekinah.
Right. In Tantra, you have the goddess Shakti. She's the dynamic, creative, immanent power of the universe, often seen as the energy coiled at the base chakra. Her awakening and ascent to unite with Shiva, the pure consciousness principle often associated with the crown chakra, is the goal of yoga union. It mirrors the role of the Shekinah as the active, revealing presence of God in the world, the bridge between the infinite and the finite. Both systems deeply honor this essential feminine dynamic for spiritual realization.
Let's turn to Taoism now. The central concept there is the Tao. How does that compare to the Kabbalistic starting point?
The resonance is immediate, isn't it? The Tao described as nameless, formless, eternal, the source of all things, yet ultimately unknowable and ineffable. It's almost a perfect conceptual match for the Ein Sof, the infinite nothingness from which everything arises in Kabbalah.
And from that formless Tao emerges.
The fundamental polarity, yin and yang, dark light, feminine, masculine, passive, active. This isn't just a vague similarity. It feels like the same underlying logic of how reality manifests. That primary split immediately brings to mind the two main pillars on the Sephirotic tree. The pillar of mercy, G'd on the right, representing expansion and kindness, balanced by the pillar of judgment or severity, Gevura, on the left, representing contraction and rigor.
Right, and the tree itself is about finding the balance between those two pillars, the middle path. Too much mercy is formless chaos. Too much severity is rigidity and death.
Exactly. Balance is key. And you see that reflected in the spiritual practice, too. Think about Taoist alchemy, the internal practices aimed at refining one's ki, life force, harmonizing yin and yang within the body, achieving longevity, or even immortality. This focus on internal refinement and harmonization strongly parallels the Kabbalistic concept of tikkun.
Tikkun meaning repair or rectification.
Yes, tikkun olam, repairing the world. But it starts with tikkun hanefesh, repairing the soul. Kabbalah teaches that creation involved a kind of shattering, and our task is to gather the divine sparks hidden in matter, to mend the broken vessels, to restore cosmic harmony through our actions and intentions. So both traditions see spiritual work as this active process of balancing internal energies, and through that, contributing to the harmony of the cosmos.
It's incredible how these patterns repeat, even if we look further back, say, to ancient Greece or Mesopotamia.
You find echoes there too. Look at Neoplatonism, particularly Plotinus. He describes emanation from the One, which is beyond being, radiating outwards into nous, intellect or mind, then the world soul, and finally down into the material world. It's a clear cascade, very much like the Sephiro flowing from Keter. And think about Hermes in Greek myth, the messenger god, moving between worlds. He resonates with the function of certain Sephiro, like Yesod, which connects the higher realms to Malkut.
In Mesopotamia,
Well, you have ancient symbols like the Sumerian world tree, linking heavens, earth, and underworld, a precursor perhaps to the more detailed tree of life. And the myth of Inanna's descent into the underworld is powerful. At each of the 7 gates, she has to strip off an item of clothing or jewelry, representing her power and identity. It's a profound image of shedding the ego, letting go of worldly attachments, which is a necessary part of almost any mystical journey towards deeper truth or union. You have to be stripped bare, in a sense.
okay, so we've seen these structural maps, ladders, trees, energy centers appearing across vastly different cultures and times. Let's bring it home. What does all this mean for you listening today? Why does it matter if the Sephiro look a bit like chakras or the Tao sounds like I Am Self?
I think the most important takeaway is a kind of validation and maybe reassurance. Seeing these parallels suggests that the deep human intuition that there is a connection between our finite lives and something infinite, that there is a path or a ladder, isn't just wishful thinking. It seems to be a fundamental part of the human spiritual blueprint, expressed in different cultural languages. The maps vary, sure, but the territory they're trying to chart and the basic stages of the journey, they seem remarkably consistent.
So it moves this stuff from being purely esoteric or academic into something quite practical. What are the key lessons we can pull from Kabbalah, maybe strengthened by seeing these global echoes, for living a better life today?
Well, the first one we touched on is absolutely central, balance. The dynamic tension between cheesed mercy, expansion, and gevura, judgment, contraction, isn't just cosmic theology, it's psychology, it's ethics. The path to wholeness, both personally and collectively, requires integrating these opposites. Too much unchecked kindness can lead to enabling harm. Too much rigid judgment leads to cruelty. You need both, wisely applied in your relationships, your decisions, your inner life.
Finding that middle pillar in our own lives. Okay. What's another key lesson?
The second flows from that idea of tikkun, the repair work. It's the profound sanctity of action. Kabbalah emphasizes that every single thing we do, every word we speak, every choice we make matters. It's a thread we weave into the fabric of reality. We aren't just passive observers or, exiles in a flawed universe. We are active co-creators. We have a role, a responsibility to elevate the mundane, to find the hidden sparks, to participate in healing the world. Whether that's through prayer, meditation, ethical conduct, or simple acts of kindness, it all contributes to this larger project of tikkun.
That's a powerful shift in perspective, isn't it?
Right.
Realizing that our daily lives, even the small things, can be part of this great repair. It gives everything a deeper sense of purpose.
Absolutely. And the third lesson maybe builds on that. It's the lesson of co-creation. Recognizing that we are partners with the divine or partners with the Tao, or however you want to phrase it, in the ongoing unfolding of the universe, and seeing that this core idea, the need for inner balance, the power of conscious action, our role as co-creators echoes in Sufism, in Taoism, in Hindu traditions. That should cultivate a sense of humility, I think, and openness. It reminds us we're all part of this incredibly ancient global human project of seeking connection, meaning, and ways to live better together.
Yeah, we started with Kabbalah maybe feeling quite exclusive or obscure, tied to one tradition. But we end up seeing it as one incredibly rich, detailed blueprint among many that humanity has come up with to map the same essential journey. Whether you call the stages Sephiroth or chakras or makamat, or talk about balancing yin and yang or mercy and judgment, the fundamental quest seems constant.
Exactly. The language changes, the rituals differ, the symbols vary, but the underlying architecture of the soul's journey back to its source shows through. And maybe that enduring pattern leaves us with this final thought to consider, for you to mull over. In a world that feels so often fractured, by dogma, by division, by arguing over whose math is right, perhaps looking at the universal light shimmering beneath all these diverse traditions can remind us of something important. That maybe our real shared destiny isn't just to debate the maps, but to actually undertake the journey, to awaken that divine spark within ourselves, to live with more compassion, and to consciously participate in that great ongoing repair of the world.